listener production.
Hi, Helen Smith here with you. Welcome to The Briefing. It's not every day a president sues a YouTuber over a global conspiracy involving power, politics and gender. In one corner, a French president, Emmanuel Macron, and his wife, Brigitte, suing for defamation. In the other corner is right-wing American influencer Candace Owens, who alleges the French First Lady is a man who's committed fraud and abuses of power.
Something must be true. You know, a president of a foreign country does not sue a mom that does her podcast in her basement because she spoke something that was not true. Like, there's clearly something that they want hidden.
In today's two-part special, we'll break down this extraordinary conspiracy, assess the claims, and explain to you what's really going on. That's coming up in the second half of this episode. First, though, let's get into the headlines with Tara Cassidy. It's Monday, the 11th of August.
Hey Helen, and to you listening, we're starting overseas where Israeli Prime Minister and accused war criminal Benjamin Netanyahu has labelled Australia shameful amid its push for Palestine to be recognised as an independent state. At a press conference this morning, Netanyahu accused various world leaders of being absurd for folding to public opinion and told reporters he wants to correct mistruths being told about Gaza, including continuing to deny that starvation is occurring.
The purpose of this news conference is to puncture the lies and spread the truth, but that distortion has been propelled around the earth.
Australia has so far fallen short of making a formal commitment to recognise a Palestinian state, but it's expected to join Canada, the UK and France at an upcoming UN meeting next month, but said it won't follow other countries like Germany in introducing export restrictions on Israel. The federal government's continued to deny that it supplies weapons to the nation. However, critics, including the Greens and human rights groups, say Australia plays a key role in fighter jet programs, and under international law, supplying parts for weapons is equal to supplying weapons. Meanwhile, the US has reportedly defended Israel, saying allegations of genocide in Gaza are untrue and that Israel has the right to decide on its security.
Yeah, and that comes as a UN emergency meeting was held at the weekend over concerns about Israel's plan to occupy all of Gaza and expand the war. Now, Netanyahu says the Israeli military already control nearly 75% of Gaza, besides Gaza City and some central camps, which he plans to take over to, quote, finish the job and defeat Hamas.
No nation can accept a genocidal terrorist organization, an organization committed to its annihilation, a stone's throw from its citizens. Our goal is not to occupy Gaza. Our goal is to free Gaza.
He says he's in talks with the US about increasing aid, but says the media is distorting the truth about starvation and that only hostages are being starved, not civilians. However, the UN says 98 children have died of starvation since the conflict began, 37 of those just last month.
The Reserve Bank of Australia are set to hand down their latest decision on the cash rate on Tuesday, with economists and financial markets again convinced it'll drop the official cash rate. They're predicting it'll go from 3.85% to 3.6%. However, they did get it wrong last time when the central bank held rates despite over 90% of experts saying a cut was coming. Now, not all board members were in favour of the hold last meeting, with 3 of the 9 voting in favour of a cut, as RBA Governor Michelle Bullock explained the decision was about timing rather than direction.
It comes as Aussies are spending more but buying less than when interest rates were at their peak in 2022, underlining the intense cost of living pressures on households right across the country. And if we do see a cut this time around, it often does lead to an increase in buyer activity, which then also puts pressure on the market and leads often to higher house prices. But it would be good news for homeowners with a variable mortgage who should not be paying interest of more than 5.5%. So to give you an example, a homeowner with a $500,000 mortgage would be set to save $2,884 a year if the cash rate is passed on in full. But who actually has a mortgage that low? So probably the amount back is actually a little bit greater than that. So I personally welcome this news. Being in that market, I really hope we see a cash rate cut.
Greyhound racing is set to finish up in Tasmania by 2029 as animal welfare advocates celebrate the news. Tasmania's Premier, Jeremy Rockcliffe, says the welfare of the animals and participants were front of mind when making the decision.
For many years now, and increasingly so, there's been concerns around animal welfare, and we're seeing an industry that is at the crossroads, in decline, and does not meet community expectations anymore.
The timing also coincides with the end of the current funding deal for the Greyhound Code in Tassie, which concludes in June 2029, as an independent report earlier this year found government funding for greyhound racing was rising year on year faster than the state's annual spend on education, but returns were diminishing. Leading up to the phase-out, the industry body Tas Racing says it will be working with and providing support to stakeholders and racing participants.
Now, the move will also see hundreds of dogs need new homes, with organisations like the RSPCA and shelters who'll be taking this task on, signalling for extra funding to help them do so. Now, looking across the country, greyhound racing was actually banned in places like the ACT back in 2018. Last year, across the ditch, it was also banned in the NZ, and we did see New South Wales try to ban it back in 2016, but that was a bit short-lived, and it was repealed later the same year, but it did see an introduction of better welfare standards brought in. Now, I think this is probably going to be something that we could see follow suit in other states and territories in time. Unfortunately, this industry has faced a lot of criticism over the years over practices that still go on in some corners despite being illegal. For example, live baiting. Other criticisms have been the number of injuries and fatalities, Helens, of the dogs that are often involved in this sport, their living conditions and overbreeding specifically for racing, and then they often find it really difficult to rehome them after their career ends. And sadly, there are a lot that land in rescue shelters, with some of the staff there saying they get some dogs that have really acute withdrawal symptoms from times they've actually also been drugged with various different concoctions to try and make them race faster. And obviously those that get caught doing that face fines and bans, but there are a lot that goes unnoticed.
And pack your raincoats and your brollies. We're in for a soggy rest of winter and spring, according to the Weather Bureau. The Bureau of Meteorology is predicting potential record-breaking wet weather for the months ahead across much of the East Coast from August right now through till November.
Yeah, and it says there's been a shift in the Indian Ocean, which is a key sign we're in for some rain for the east, but also warmer than usual months ahead right across the country. Now, particularly in spring, it's looking like 60 to 80% more likely to have above average rain.
Yeah, and in areas like eastern Queensland, New South Wales, northern Victoria and South Australia, they're likely to see record rain with figures in the top 20 of all time.
Which is just devastating for people like me, Helen, as I am officially 2 weeks out from my island wedding. We literally chose Straddie because it was meant to be the driest month of the year over there, and I might have to pack my gumboots to walk down the aisle, so think of me.
And Instagram has a controversial new map feature that allows users to share their location with followers, sparking backlash over safety concerns. But don't worry, the feature isn't rolling out in Oz yet, but users in the US have claimed their location has been shared without them knowing. However, Meta, Instagram's parent company, says the feature is opt-in only and that it shouldn't be automatically activated on your account, saying users can choose whether to share their location with followers they follow back or selected users, which does seem like a lot of people to me if you're sharing it with every person you follow back.
Yeah, like why do you need to know where anybody is like that? I don't know. But some users have also reported that while they're saying this is an opt-in thing, they found that theirs was turned on as soon as their phone had that update. So just something to be aware of, and it is coming to Australia next. So this feature is also very similar to Snapchat maps, where users' locations are shared there. And we know that that drew a lot of criticism and concerns from people in the past around safety when it comes to, say, DV perps or under 18s sharing their locations with predators often using online platforms and not a lot of oversight. So definitely one to just keep in mind when you get that update on your own phones. But what do you guys think about this? We'd love to know your thoughts on the map feature. Yes, no. We'll pop a question in our broadcast channel Behind the Briefing on Instagram. Now, that brings our headlines to a close for today. Coming up next is Helen and I's two-part deep dive into Candace Owens versus the Macrons, looking into why the French president is suing a US podcaster. Part 1 is up next, and Part 2 will be in your feeds very shortly. It's not often a sitting president takes legal action against a media critic, but French President Emmanuel Macron and his wife Brigitte have done just that. But that doesn't seem to have perturbed their foe. Last week, Candace Owens doubled down on her allegation, betting $300,000 with British media host Piers Morgan that the First Lady was a biological man and a fraud. This story is wild, but also complex, with many layers to unpeel to get your head around it, as Helen and I discovered while researching it. So that's why we've split your deep dive into two parts today, the background and then the case itself. Good morning, I'm Tara Cassidy. Let's kick off with part 1.
Emmanuel Macron, the president of France, I'm pretty sure him and his husband Brigitte are going to come for my life. What can we say other than the Macrons sure are not behaving like a couple who have absolutely nothing to hide. And today, I have been sued by the First Lady Man of France. So let's just go, guys. Let's just go. Welcome back to Candace.
Just over 2 weeks ago, a right-wing podcaster in the US, Candace Owens, was sued by France's first couple, Emmanuel and Brigitte Macron, after she made public allegations that Brigitte was born a man. The claim's been dubbed a widely circulated conspiracy theory that's been around for over a decade, that Candace went on to make an 8-part series on, all of which we're going to unpack next. But first, who is Candace Owens?
So, Candace Owens is a very controversial but is also a very popular figure in the US among conspiracy groups, and she calls herself an investigative journalist, and she has started studying journalism at college but dropped out in her senior year, reportedly due to an issue with her student loan. And she's now one of the country's most watched and listened to podcasters. Candace has been labelled a far-right podcaster and is considered a conservative Republican, but she's actually split from the MAGA crowd in the US and doesn't align with MAGA as much anymore. So in the past, she was a vocal advocate for Trump, and in May 2018, she became a, quote, darling of President Donald Trump after a video of her berating black protesters at the University of California, saying they were privileged Americans obsessed with shouting about slavery went viral. But now, in 2025, the MAGA crowd have distanced themselves from her over anti-Semitic comments, and Candace has also pulled away over Trump's role in the Israel-Iran conflict. Other reasons Candace has been criticised and called a conspiracy theorist is her suggestion that the Holocaust was ethnic cleansing that almost took place. She's denied climate change, saying it's a lie used to extract dollars from Americans. She says abortion and Planned Parenthood has, quote, successfully trained us blacks to exterminate ourselves. And she's also rejected that people can be transgender, saying you cannot change your gender, men will always be men and women will always be women. And quick clarification here on the difference between sex and gender. Gender is considered by many experts to be a social construct as opposed to the biological sex you're born with.
Now, Candace has also promoted other conspiracy theories relating to the LGBTQI plus community and recently said, quote, I believe women are being socially engineered to hate men and men are being socially engineered to be gay. She has also said that transgenderism is worse than the Jim Crow laws that racially segregated Americans.
Which brings me to the greatest civil rights violation of our time, which is taking place right now, and that is transgenderism. And I'm going to make a very strong statement right now, and I mean it. It is worse than Jim Crow laws because we are mutilating the bodies of children. How could you not see that as something worse? You segregated white people versus black people, you wouldn't be harming children, and we are doing that.
Now, she's also downplayed slavery in the US, saying it was white people who freed the slaves and asking rhetorically who fought and died to end slavery. Now, Tyler Parry in the Washington Post points out that comments like these are commonly used by conservatives in the US to promote self-congratulatory myths of white saviors to try and celebrate the achievements of white Americans, which Tyler argues actually compounds the challenges of racism by decentering Black people from the history of civil rights campaigns. And he says these stories help play down the structural inequalities of racism that persist. Now, Candace is a critic of the Black Lives Matter movement as well, a supporter of controversial rapper Kanye West, who was actually blocked from coming into Australia for publicly praising and glorifying Hitler.
And it turns out they have visa refusal issues in common. Earlier this year, Candace was also barred from entering Australia, primarily over anti-Semitic comments. During an interview she did with Tristan Tate, the brother of self-described misogynist Andrew Tate, who are both facing charges of rape, actual bodily harm, and human trafficking, Candace said this about Judaism.
Pedophile-centric religion that believes in demons, it believes in child sacrifice.
Then later added,
I'm waking people up to the fact that pedophiles are in power.
Yes.
They are literally in power. And that is intentional because then they can be controlled while they are in power. It is not a coincidence that Justin Trudeau is gay. Obama, gay. Zelensky, gay. Emmanuel Macron, gay and married to a trans man who molested him when he was a child. For me, the litmus test now is like Brigitte Macron. I'm like, one picture of yourself in your first 30 years of living, please.
Yeah. Show me her brother.
Where's your brother?
Where is
Jean
he?
Michel.
I'll show you my brother.
Quick fact check on that. Brigitte Macron has provided photos from her childhood, and her brother has been in court with her and has been seen publicly with her. But we'll get into the details of that a little later. There's also no suggestion any of the claims in her interview with Tate are true. Now, Candace has also interviewed Harvey Weinstein after he was found guilty of sexual assault and convicted of sex crimes. Weinstein was at the centre of the hashtag #MeToo movement, which Candace has called a fundamentally stupid movement that allows women to completely ruin a man's life on the basis of an allegation. And she believes Weinstein is innocent.
After looking over this case, I've concluded that Harvey Weinstein was wrongfully convicted and was basically just hung on the Me Too thing.
Now, going back to Candace versus Macron, this story can feel uncomfortable as it could be seen as implying there's something wrong with being transgender, which obviously there isn't. And discussions like this can often talk about transgender people without them being at the helm of the conversation.
Now, over the years, there's been other prominent women in politics, including Michelle Obama and Kamala Harris, that have also faced claims of being secretly transgender across social media, with a report by the Wilson Center actually saying that it is a deeply misogynistic trend, and that these narratives tap into the trope of the duplicitous woman, implying that not only are transgender individuals inherently deceptive, but that this deception is responsible for the power and influence that these women hold. Now, to explain how the Macrons versus Candace Owens case arose, we need to go back to where this all started. Now, the claims first picked up traction when they were populated by a journalist called Natasha Ray, who describes herself as an independent investigative journalist, self-taught and not from the inner circle of mainstream media, in a now 4-hour-long deleted interview with a spiritual medium named Amandine Roy.
The video got over 450,000 views before it got taken down. Brigitte Macron filed a libel complaint against the two women after they posted the YouTube video in December 2021, alleging she had once been a man named Jean-Michel Trangeur, who is actually Brigitte's brother. Ray said she had spent 3 years investigating Brigitte Macron after questioning the First Lady's body shape in photos, and conspiracy theories online since have further added fuel to the fire. In August 2024, an altered picture of a young Russian male model had been shared online with false allegations it was Brigitte Macron as a young man, with the caption, "Well, there you go. It's no longer a state secret. It's true that this is Macron's wife." However, this was debunked by Reuters, a credible international news organisation, that the fabricated screenshot featuring the edited black and white image alongside an authentic photo of Brigitte was actually of a model by freelance photographer Elena Rostronova, who told Reuters it does not show Brigitte Macron.
Now, another layer to the allegations made online are over grooming claims, as Emmanuel Macron met Brigitte when she was his teacher. She was 39 and he was 15, so having a 24-year age gap between them. Now, the Macrons claim the teacher-student relationship between Mrs. Macron and President Macron remained within the bounds of the law. Now, author Anne Fulda, who wrote the book Emmanuel Macron, A Perfect Young Man, actually spoke to his parents about how they met and found out that Macron's parents believed their son was dating Brigitte's daughter, Lawrence. And when the truth was revealed through a family friend, they were taken by surprise, and once they knew about Macron's strong feelings for his teacher, they actually decided to transfer him to Lycée Henri IV in Paris, which is a school there. But he and Brigitte kept in touch as he continued through to higher education. Now, this timeline and the ages of when the pair did meet did create genuine backlash over their relationship, as Macron was a student and Brigitte was his teacher, so the power imbalance and the dynamics there definitely weren't equal. Now, separate to the public backlash, Candace has furthered this along, calling Brigitte Macron disgusting, a pedophile, and stated in an episode of This Past Weekend with Theo Von that President Macron was 14 and Mrs. Macron was 40 when the couple met, which would have made that illegal in France. And she goes on to say that they don't deny that, which the Macrons actually do refute. She then separately claims in an episode of The Tim Dillon Show that it was actually 48 and 14, so a disparity in the ages there.
Now, going back to the video by Roy and Ray, Brigitte sued the pair for defamation over the claims made in the interview, who both denied any wrongdoing, and Brigitte won. In September 2024, the Paris Judicial Court found both women guilty of defamation, and they were ordered to pay €8,000 to Brigitte Macron and €5,000 to her brother. But in July 2025, that verdict was then overturned by an appeals court in France on the grounds of good faith. The Paris Court of Appeal said the allegations about gender and transition were made in good faith and therefore did not constitute defamation, given the importance of freedom of expression in a democratic society, court documents show. So what does good faith mean? French jurists have identified two general and independent definitions for good faith. The first being honesty in legal actions, and the second, a negligible misconception which is supported as a right, and can be used as a legal basis to justify supporting a person against the misconception arising from that person's lack of knowledge or awareness. Now, it's also important to note that the rule on the defamation case was not on Brigitte's gender, contrary to claims online, meaning it did not prove Brigitte was a man in any way, and the court did not rule on the truth of the claims about her gender. And Brigitte and her brother are now escalating the case to a higher French court after the lower court let the two women off. So, to be continued on that one.
Now, Candace Owens enters the picture, and this is when this conspiracy theory really took off, when Candace Owens began voicing and publishing the information and these claims first made by Natasha Ray, then Xavier Passard, on her podcast, on X, and in various interviews. Now, Xavier Passard is a French journalist who actually worked with Natasha Ray, and he was the first one to publish a book titled Becoming Brigitte about his investigation into the claims. It was this book that Candace Owens based a lot of what she says off, and she then went on to launch her own 8-part podcast and YouTube series titled Becoming Brigitte, which brings us to now. Last month, in July 2025, Emmanuel Macron and his wife Brigitte filed a defamation lawsuit against Candace Owens for her claims and that series. Now, the 219-page complaint against Candace has been filed by the Macrons in the Delaware Superior Court in the US, where they're seeking a jury trial and unspecified punitive damages. Now, we will be unpacking that in the next episode, but for now, that brings part 1 of our 2-part deep dive into the Macrons versus Candace Owens to a close. If you found this ep interesting, don't forget to leave us a comment or a review, or you can check us out on Instagram at The Briefing Podcast. I'm Tara Cassidy.
And I'm Helen Smith. Catch you next time.